Welcome back, everyone. Here we are at Memorial Day. What a lovely time to be together to celebrate U12, one of my favorite units out of the entire home study course. Ken and I are sharing a box here this evening, and we are here with Ken Pearson, Jim Porter, and John Bonzel. And so before I ask Ken to do our opening meditation today, I just wanted to ask everyone for one as we go into Unit 12. One bit of wisdom about what was meaningful to you.
Were you asking me, sweetie?
I am asking you, Mr. John.
Yeah, it was breaking up a little bit. Well, I wanted the world to know that Dr. Russell, by the time they got to Unit 12, was bedridden. And Leo had shared with Jim and I how she had written pretty much Unit 12 on her own. She wanted to call it love, but later on, I guess that's when the love book came out in I don't know, I think that was early 70s, if I'm not mistaken.
Somewhere in there.
Hello, Margaret.
Hi.
Hi, Margaret.
Hi. Nice to see you.
All right, so I was just asking everybody for a nugget of wisdom before I have Ken do our meditation to get us grounded here today. So, Jim, what's your thought as we go in here to lesson 45 today?
I stopped one week at the Living of Life section, which we'll get to, with the line, "The purpose of your whole life's experience is to find and know your Creator." I have said that throughout the course, and it's nice to see it verified so directly.
All right, and so Margaret, what's one thought for you before we do our meditation? Just one piece of wisdom you want to share with people. Unit 12 was my favorite unit out of the entire home study course. It was like a cosmic hug at the end of all this study for me the very first time I went through it.
I would say that if people could really learn to love whatever it is they're doing and put their whole soul into it, and then it'll nurture them. Because too many people, they hate their boss, they hate their work, they need to just put their all in what it is they're doing now, and it'll lead to something even more.
I think that's beautifully said. So
yeah, you just took what I was going to say, Margaret. No, and I'm going to not jump on that exactly, but I found out for me, and it's that Jim just said it in that line about the supreme goal for all of us is to find God within ourselves. And that is the cosmic play of drama of creation, and to me, it was about how do I get that? And the trick is you don't get it, you give it. And it's in giving it that you're re-giving it. And what do I give? I give God to you, whoever you are. And the way that I do that is I see God in you. And so like Margaret said, it's like, learning to do everything you can with love. It doesn't mean that I'm going to love everything I do. Like when John brings me over to clean up mulch and shovel stuff, doesn't mean I love doing it, but I put love into it. And then when you look at Avalon, the place is so gorgeous, you feel just miraculous about it. So it doesn't mean I love straining my back, but I do love the feeling purpose and doing the work. So there's always so much to get out of everything you do, whether you're washing your car or you're building an empire. It's the same thing. When it's done with love, it's you don't tire as much. And ultimately, for me, was finding God within by giving God to everybody I could without saying a word, just mindfully giving God to people, seeing God in you, whoever you are.
Well,
Kimberly, if I could just make one additional comment. I guess because Unit 12 has been lingering all this week, not every night, but during the day, I was listening to Jennifer Rush. She was the gal that originally sang "The Power of Love." You remember that song?
Yeah.
Very, very powerful. And it's just been going through my mind. So I guess that was the lead in to Unit 12 for me, is to just have those words, and you're right. If you can't glorify God, and if you don't start your day out by glorifying God, then what are you doing?
All right. Well, there's a lot to be said there. I myself have had certainly a lot of experiences recently as well, and I'll be sharing a little bit about that, about my experiences, about how God has certainly led me. But my love, why don't you start us off with a meditation just to get us grounded here before we begin?
All right, James, bring us up those waves, and we're gonna decentrate for a minute before we do some concentrating on this message of Unit 12. And to decentrate is to unwind. So it's the opposite of concentrate. We're working around the house, or we're active and we're concentrating, we're focusing, and then the opposite of that would be to decentrate, to unfocus, to kind of just let your mind go. To me, I call it daydreaming. I go to a daydream state. And it's stillness. I'm not thinking about anything. My mind is full with just stillness. And we achieve that by desire. It is not a breathing process or a thinking process, it's a desiring process. So what I encourage you to do is desire stillness. And as I desire stillness, I notice my thinking gets longer and longer as opposed to shorter and shorter when I concentrate. So just let your thoughts get slower and slower. The cadence of my voice will get slower. And if you think about all of that winding down for a moment, take a look at those waves in that ocean, or just listen. Listen for the unheard. See the unseen. And we do this again by desire. Just desire to be still. Desire to have no thoughts. And I'll recite from the Divine Iliad. And it's in Unit 2. Actually, Unit 1, excuse me. The glory of thy anointing light descends upon me, and my soul quickeneth. Thy light is all around me. Thy light shines through me. Thy light encompasses me. I am dissolved in thy light. Thy light and my light have become one. I am immersed in my light. I am in thy light, knowing thy light. And here I say, be thou with me, so that I would not be myself alone. And just let yourself settle into that. Be thou with me, so that I will not be myself alone. Just desire to know that God is within, and you have every right to have full connection right here, right now, by desire. We'll just take another 10, 20 more seconds. Just desire that light. And it's a steel light. All right, that's good enough. Music, that's good enough there, James. Thank you, guys. Come on back.
All right. So I want to say welcome to everyone. So hello, Miss Charlotte. So Kimberly Faith, I am one of the panelists as well, as we've been going along the way. This unit is one of my favorite units out of all of them, and it was so touching to my heart. And so I wanted to have us dive into it. You know, I've had a rough couple of weeks health-wise, had some things to deal with unexpectedly, and as an independent woman, there's nothing like the heartbeat of the universe stopping you for a moment to really recalibrate and recenter. And I have to tell you, the morning salutation of the day and the invocation of the evening were two things that I really clung to as I went through this experience. And I was really touched. Before we go into the lesson, I wanted to bring the panelists' attention to actually page, this is the second page of this particular lesson 45, because here we are in Unit 12. And hello, Miss Bonnie. So glad to see you. And I wanted just to ask the panelists, all three of you actually worked with Leo. It says books which we strongly recommend for supplemental reading. And I found that to be incredibly just before we get into the lesson, I wanted just to ask everybody. I know I have a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, but I do not have those other books. Do all of you have those other books, or I wanted to ask you to comment before we continue?
What page are you on?
I'm on the page right after the first title page in Unit 12, so it's right inside the cover.
So literally the very first page. Yeah.
Sorry to
So-
throw you all off.
Just behind the cover. Just behind the cover.
Margaret?
I do have Bhagavad Gita and also Cosmic Consciousness. I do have the Dawn of Consciousness as well, and The Way of Life. I never could find Man the Unknown, and I do have Walt Whitman as well.
Mm.
But you know, the Bhagavad Gita was very hard for me to grasp. I think it's because it's an allegorical, and I haven't studied it thoroughly enough. I'd like to go back and try again, but I find that the Russell's teachings are just way clearer than any of these. So,
Ariana. I read the Bhagavad Gita. I thought it was a fabulous book, and the reason I was able to rip through it so well was because of this home study course and the Russell's writings and teaching. They've helped me to read through other people's work so much more expeditiously. And like you said, Margaret, I got such a clarity that I can read things, even the Bible, and get things because of the work I've done in this work. And it's just the message comes through. I can get the truth, right? And that's one thing reading this unit about the truth, that we all are seeking the truth that's going to be coming up, and why the truth is so important. There's a great explanation of why the truth and what the truth is really all about. John.
I was going to bring to everyone's attention that, first of all, in Dr. Russell's 52 lecture series, you know, he mentions the Bhagavad Gita, and he had a pocket version.
That's right.
He had notes in it, and he said he wouldn't take $1 million for his little copy. But, you know, it's illuminates recognizing other illuminates. And that's why Leo, I think she dedicated 5-6 pages towards the end of Why You Cannot Die, different excerpts from the Bhagavad Gita that are so powerful.
Yeah.
I believe I'm correct in saying that, aren't I, James?
Yes.
Not only that, it's in the home study course, guys. It's also in the home study course. There's lots of quotes from the Bhagavad Gita, Ariana, there's a couple other, Cosmic Consciousness, all that stuff. Anyway.
Well, and Jim, I wanted to ask you just to comment, because I know you collect a lot of those books as well. I just didn't want us to gloss over that, because obviously the Russells felt it was pretty important to list it in their home study course.
I have all of them, and I actually have Leo's copy of the Bhagavad Gita. I was walking in the upper hallway on the way to the office once, and I hadn't been there that long, a couple of months, and she came out and was holding it, and I asked her what she was reading, and she explained to me it was the Bhagavad Gita, which I'd never heard of. And I said, I'll have to read that someday. And she said, well, here, dear, you take my copy.
Oh.
And I've read through it multiple times. I love it. It's just so beautiful and poetic. I mean, when they call it the Song Celestial, that's a perfect name for it.
And you get, in the Bhagavad Gita, you get the undivided and divided. So you can see where Walter had even adopted some of the language.
Yes. And John's right. Illuminates know other illuminates.
Yeah.
Right.
Even if they don't personally meet them, they know they know where they are. You know, it's amazing.
Me and Kimberly will be the bobbing heads.
So let's go ahead and jump ahead.
You need to alternate your bobbing, and see, that would be better.
Well, hey, I almost had you earlier, because before Margaret came on, I said, yeah, this is a couples podcast, and Jim and John are going to be a couple, and Kimberly and I will be a couple. But Margaret crashed the party, man, so I couldn't.
So let's move forward with some humor and love here, and let's go ahead and jump ahead to page 847. And John, I was going to ask you if you would to read that first sentence that's highlighted and go into the second paragraph, and then I'm going to ask Ken to go into the paragraph that's got the green brackets. But the title of this section is called "The Transformation of Man."
When man shall at last know God, he shall then be transformed. Dynamic knowledge of the identity and presence of God within the soul of man and throughout all nature is a necessary stage for the human race to obtain before it is possible for it to build an enduring civilization of utility and brotherhood. The only reason man has never known God is because he is still in his intellectual infancy, and his ideals and practices are still pagan and barbarous.
Ken, if you'll do the next one.
Barbarous. That was really good. All right.
Ooh.
To know God, man must know what light is, and also energy, gravitation, and God's processes in the building of bodies which manifest his presence and his purposes. And he must know the mysteries of life, death, and growth, and the seed into which even the giant oak disappears but still retains its identity. And he must know how man retains his identity when he also disappears.
And Margaret, if you'd help us finish off that page, I thought this was important for us to honor what they had to say, those last two small paragraphs.
Okay. No man has yet known these things. The concepts of modern sages regarding them are totally unlike God's processes. The conclusions of man regarding them are the conclusions of his senses. His mind has never yet pierced their illusions. He still senses effects without knowing their causes. These things you shall now know, and when you comprehend them within your inner self, you will then know God.
Do you want to comment on that? I wanted to ask the panel to slow down for a moment with that particular page, because I thought it was quite telling before we even entered the lesson. What needs to be said?
Well, after that statement that Margaret beautifully read, I think we should close the book. Just kind of go ahead and exit the broadcast and tell everybody we'll see them next year.
Yeah, that's a heck of a message. There you go.
There you go, Karen.
Actually,
Bruno. So good to see you all. Margaret?
Yeah, as I was reading this, I was thinking about the science call that happened a few days ago. And Darren was telling us, you know, you look up into the sky and you think the cloud is moving across. But he says, actually, the cloud does not move. The potentialities are changing, which makes the cloud appear to go across the sky. But it's the potentialities that creates the illusion of movement.
Oh man, I thought the clouds were actually moving, Margaret.
I could have sworn I've read in this in Walter Russell's work that they move at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. So I don't know about that one. So, but I'm going to trust Walter's work as opposed to Karen's. But I know I've read that literally in Walter's work. The clouds move at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, but we don't see that speed because of the relevance of what you're talking about, and because of the rotation of the Earth, the orbit of the Earth and the rotation of the Earth. We don't detect it, but at the equator, they're moving at 1,000 miles an hour.
Yeah, but you have to remember God is still, so that still presence is everywhere. So if we can move and get into that stillness, right, then we would understand all motion. So we want to try and squeeze into that little still spot.
Okay.
So as we go over here to page 849.
Can I just say one thing before we go? One thing that I've learned from me that helps me to personalize this message, and I'm going to use the last sentence as an example on 847 that Margaret read. These things I shall now know. And when I comprehend them within my inner self, I will then know God. And it personalizes it for me, as opposed to be written for we and our and humankind. Not that it isn't, but I want to personalize it to my life. So this is, and it goes deeper in me about things I need to know, what I need to learn about the God within me. And therefore, I encourage people to read it. I call it first person. Read it in first person.
Also, can I jump in here for a second too? Isn't it nice, once again, and they do it throughout the course, to be reminded that we are not broken, we are not damaged, we are evolving. You look at the world and you think, oh, how can it be this bad? It's to look at the world and think that, and we all do, you want to stop and right away say, wow, how far have I come that I can look at that and want better for them? How many don't know that? So it's not, just grasp that concept. The world is not broken, it's evolving and it's awakening.
I think that's
And
beautifully said.
that goes right in line with it's not a created world, it's a creating world.
Yes.
There's a lot of things people think are created. It's not, it's creating.
A lot to be said for those 3 letters. So here we go. We're on lesson 45 for unit 12. Now I had the arrow by lesson 45 because John, I couldn't help but add the 5 to 4, and here we were to 9. And for those people that are new, what is the favorite sentence about? If you can read, what is it?
And count to 9. You can master the secrets of the universe.
All right, so here we go into the spirituality of love. And so I wanted to read just a few elements here, and I'm going to ask the panel to comment. It says this entire unit is built upon the spirituality of love. So if you would like to place that in the chat box, the spirituality of love. To truly know love as a soul motivating force of the universe is man's primary purpose on earth. The incidents of man's life are of secondary importance. If every institution of man's civilization were built upon loving service, given and all interchanging with others, this world would be a wonderfully happy one, for only good would then be given. That is what we mean by the spirituality of love. For God is love, and God is good. God gives only good to his divided Father, Mother universe, and this good is manifested by giving and re-giving. Nature, which is a manifestation of good, always gives, it never takes. So let's pause there for just a minute and have the panel talk, because those are some big concepts right there in the very beginning of Unit 12, the spirituality of love. Who wants
I
to
thought
jump
you
in?
were going to lead into that prayer where it says, God is good, God is great. Let us.
Oh, I remember that so much that I was
There you go.
good. I do remember that, John.
Actually, when
Well, think about that. If, people, I say people, the world, they need to control their thinking. And, they need to bring God into their thinking. So instead of a last resort, right, or the last thought of the day, maybe a prayer in the evening, you might give some thought to God, or something special happened to you and you want to thank God. But it should be a moment to moment awareness. And, you can get distracted and things can happen, and, you have to step aside for a little bit, but that should be your main focus, is to glorify God. And in glorifying God, you're glorifying yourself, and that's okay. That's okay. So, try to control your thinking, and to know why you're here. You're here to discover your divinity and then live it. And that's what we're all trying to do.
Yeah, that's a great point that John's talking about in terms of my thinking. For me, I come from a pretty rough life, a drug and alcoholic world. I've been sober now 34 years, but the reality of it is I got lost for a long period of time. And it was in discovering that I can either self-talk or God talk. But one way or the other, I'm always talking, and I'm talking in my head. Even while I'm talking to you, I can talk in my head. Even while you're talking, I'm definitely talking in my head. So I found out I'm a big self-talker, and I can change that from self-talking to what John was talking about, and now it can become God talk. So God, be with me while I whack these weeds. Can you help me wash these dishes? Can you help me have fun washing these dishes? It's like John's saying, if I don't invite God into my thinking, then all I have left is my little thinking, right? There's little self and big self. Big self is when I'm one with God in my thinking. But for me, it took a lot of cognitive effort. I had to keep inviting God in. And the pain that I got in was an example that I was not thinking and living with God. So that was a motivator for me to keep inviting God into my thoughts. My company is called Thought Life Connection. So at 70,000 thoughts a day, I've come to realize, and I've learned that language from this home study course about how important our thought lives are, which John was illustrating. Inviting God in, even while you're on this podcast. Can you help me hear what you'd have me hear, God? Can you help me say what you'd have me say? It's a constant communion for me. So I really thanks for saying that, John. That was really good.
You bet, man.
Jim, go ahead, Margaret.
I'll just add a quick little. I just finished recently rereading The Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe, and there's a cute story in there when Walter Russell was a bellboy. He was young, And the very first time he was offered a tip, he refused it, and he went down into the basement and he wondered why. And he made this determination he was going to be the best bellboy ever without accepting any tips. And so he got several offers for families to adopt him because he was just 10 or 11 years old. And then they wanted to know more about him. They were just so taken with his level of service. And then he was able to sell small drawings and artwork, and he made way more money selling his artwork than he ever would have received in tips. So that's the spirituality of love. I think accepting a tip is like taking, and that's why he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So no tax on tips wouldn't have done him any good anyway.
Well, it kind of goes in there. What Margaret's saying there is that love, motivating force, fine person, of instance of non-second person, institution, it would be a happy one. If this is meant by spiritual love for God and good, God gives only good to his divided mother father. So, like Margaret's saying, when we have an agenda of like, I'll help you, I'll be of a lot of service, but make sure you tip me. I don't know how many tip guys stand at the door and like, is that it? You need anything else? And their hands out. And so you give them a tip and it's done. But if you didn't give them a tip, you'd feel this compulsion, like Margaret's saying, to like, what can I do to help them? What, that's an inch to not be, to have to just be of love given of service for the gift of giving love. That's it, without seeking to get anything in return. And that is, and thus the like Margaret was saying, they had said that he would have gotten $100 worth of tips that summer. They can make up to $100 in the tips and summers at the hotel. He ended up making $800 in his sketches, which was 7 times more than they had said that you could do on a good summer. So again, re-given.
So let me ask.
Could I demonstrate a gift of love from our Creator?
Sure.
Go ahead.
How about that right there?
Wow.
Oh, beautiful, man. That's out of your garden too, baby.
Yes, it is. So that's when you have that staring you in the face all day long, you can't help but be thankful and so on. So anyway.
So let me ask the panel about these next 2 sentences, because these next 2 sentences are really, really big.
Can I just say one thing though, because that was a great demonstration of love, right? The beautiful flowers are in the garden, but John's put them in a vase and brought them in his house. He planted every one of those flowers. He doctors those flowers and nurtures those flowers and fertilizes those flowers and cleans the leaves and the weeds out of those flowers and then brings them in. See, that's love. And if you go to Avalon and John's place, you can so feel the love in that environment. I call it a piece of canvas. It's like a painting that he's been painting on for 30 years. It's just beautiful art around his home. And that is just love given into his life. It's just living love. It's living the spiritual law of love, for sure.
Well, and I'm sure there are many people here that are very good about doing that even for themselves. I know I've given myself flowers for many, many years. I stopped worrying about ever waiting for others and remembering to celebrate God's love at any moment. I would like to hit 2 sentences before we go to our first break. And these are 2 sentences that are here under 850. And it says this. I'm going to read those. It says, good, therefore, is not divided into its opposite expression, which is evil. It is forever unchanging. Deep within man's consciousness is the knowledge that love is all there is. For love is God, and God is all there is. So I'm genuinely asking the panel if you could talk about those 2 sentences, because there's a lot packed into it. We have a world that is polarized and gets themselves caught up between good and evil. We have a world that doesn't understand that love is equal to God, and they lose their way in the fact that love is God and God is all there is. So who wants to jump in first?
That looks like Margaret does. All right.
Well, I was going to say that the concept of evil was created by man, and it's because man has taken actions that has created agony in his own life, and then he gives it a word, evil. And it is unfortunate that even in religion today, they do teach like that there's an evil force. But Leah would say that's of man's own making. It does not belong to God. It's our own making because of the agonies that we've experienced through our life. We have to externalize it, give it a name, but it's actually non-existent.
You know, Kimberly, the word good, and there is no opposite to good, because God is good and good is God, and God is, period. There is no opposite to God. God is. So good and love, it just is, isness. I love that expression. It just is. So like Margaret said, you know, man and his inventions to control other man with the concept of evil, and think of the time wasted of trying to, for the average person to try to figure that out, that's been brainwashed. And I never could figure out what that fuel source was, Margaret, in that hot place that we're all going to. Have you ever figured out what the fuel is?
Yeah. How do they set that hell on fire, right?
Well, the fuel was fear.
There you
Because
go.
Yeah.
I was raised Catholic, and I did live in fear of flames.
Wow.
Fear was very much a big part of it. Jim, what's your thought? You're on mute, Jim.
The
He's just
collective
looking
thoughts,
for the next break.
yeah, the collective thoughts for humanity, of humanity, and our individual ones too, are always coming back upon us. And yes, over time it can wear you down, and the disappointments can wear you down. But that's the whole reason for focusing on love and meditation and prayer, is to give you that sense of immediately seeking that inner silence and inner love when things are falling apart in your life, instead of looking at the storm. Do like Christ told the disciples in the boat: stop looking at the storm, look upon me, look upon the divine. And because it wouldn't have mattered if they all drowned in that storm. It would not have changed their destiny one bit. They would come back and pick up where they left off. And I mean, we all know loss. I've known a lot of loss in the last few years. And the approach to that is more love. It's just more love. And anything other than that is just, you're just being drawn into a whirlpool of illusion that there is such a thing as hatred and evil. What they are is imbalances in thinking, nothing more. So
Yes.
turn away from that storm and go within.
So we have some very, very powerful things to cover. We're going to be going into page 851, but it is time for our very first break. And I want to encourage everyone that's listening here today is that these are unpacking some pretty deep-seated beliefs. And I want to encourage all of you, because even I myself, I'll be the first one to admit to you personally, is that this has been one of the biggest things that I've also had to unpack myself. And understanding that there is only good, there is only God, and that love is God. And so these are powerful beliefs. And so as you listen to the rest of our broadcast, invite in healing, invite in support, invite in joy. What we do is that every 30 minutes, we do take a quick 30-minute break to have you stretch, stand up, get
3
some
minutes.
water.
3 minutes,
Excuse me,
not 30.
3-minute break. The time has been wonky. 3-minute break, and then come right back to us, and we'll continue the conversation. Team will be on 851. See you in 3 minutes. Thank you. All right, and you'll find your way back. Find your way back. Now, in each unit, there's always so much to cover. And so this is the first of the series of 4 units for Unit 12. We're in Lesson 45. And I want to just set the stage for what it talks about here at the top of page 851, because then I'm going to have the panel be talking about the third paragraph down when it talks about searching for your mate. But I want to start off with the top and just allude to a few things, because they said with each accomplishment, there is a faint sense of something missing. That elusive something is what man is eternally searching for. So I wanted to ask everyone tuning in tonight, has there ever been a time in your life where you just felt something was missing? You couldn't quite put your finger on it. You couldn't quite identify it. You weren't quite sure what it was, but you just knew something wasn't aligned in your life. So I was just curious for the group. And then it goes on to talk about explaining life's cosmic drama, which I think has been really, really powerful. And I wanted to read this with the yellow brackets. It said, to those who know love, know God. And knowing God, know the ecstasy of eternal oneness. Can the panel please talk a moment about the ecstasy of eternal oneness? That's a pretty mind-blowing sentence right there.
I would say that when you experience that, it's like timelessness. You have no sense of time. You know, you're just kind of like, I'll just say that you're in the moment. You're there and nothing distracts you. And the secret for all of us is how long can you hold that moment? How long can you sustain that sense of oneness?
Okay. I love that thought, John. And I know in today's busy life, it tries to keep us from ever really experiencing that. What about the rest of you on that panel? What is the ecstasy of eternal oneness?
Well, I can say to me, the ecstasy of eternal oneness is I looked up the word ecstasy, which I encourage everybody, which I do, is take words, and if I think I understand, I still want to know what the definition is. And ecstasy, by definition terms, means to be exceedingly content and fulfilled. And like John's saying, when you are exceedingly content and fulfilled, that is what I would define as a perfect moment. And in a perfect moment, time ceases to exist because you're not lacking anything, nor are you losing anything. So because in the moment you're fulfilled, baking a cake, washing your car, making a new invention, playing music, or art, if you like art, any kind of creative endeavor usually gets you into that ecstasy of feeling that oneness, and therefore I'm no longer divided. Perfection to me also happens in the in-between moments, like John was talking about. It's not about a watch. It's not about how long, because it's timeless. And if you ever think of how many times in your life have you been exceedingly content and fulfilled, and there's no way you could probably begin to count. So you've had perfection countless times in your life. Therefore, it's attainable. Why wait for it? And that's what these lessons are all about, again, speaking to me about finding God within myself. That's what it's telling me, is that my eternal search in life is to find God within me. And that all the experiences of my life are all to lead me to that God within, as Jim was saying. All of it is to lead us to the one source, which is where ecstasy lies, is within, when we're in that state of ecstasy. And that can be happen at any time, at any place, anywhere, as long as you're doing something and you feel exceedingly content and fulfilled. You're actually having a perfect moment. And I like to call them out. I just had a perfect moment because I was just gone. I was seeing everything. I wasn't lacking anything. I wasn't wanting anything. So that to me is a perfect moment. That's oneness.
Margaret, can you comment? And then
Yeah,
Jim?
what I would add is eternal oneness, I think, is when you actually feel that presence of God or the presence of love, because ecstasy is a good word, because it's a quiet ecstasy. And so and it is something you remember and you can recall, because it's not something that you are aware of all the time. Like in a busy workaday world, you know, there's stuff to do, right? But if you recall back to the presence that you felt in this particular event or in your life, if you recall that, you realize it's always there. It's always there. Yeah.
Lovely. Jim?
Wow, I'm impressed.
Nothing you want to add to the peanut gallery, Jim?
I just what I work on in my life and have for some time now is just holding to the understanding that you're not trying to become a universal being. You are a universal being experiencing less than that for the purpose of manifesting that here in body. That's why we're here. That's why we chose to come here. There's nothing lost. Like Ken so beautifully said, things can happen that distract you and take you away from that. But if you really look back at your life in deep thought, most of your life, he's 100% on. You have lived in peace and ecstasy. It's just the times you hit that proverbial thumb with a hammer that stand out. But the peace and ecstasy is with you because it is you.
Or Jim, if you hit a chair with your ribs, then that
That's
can knock
true.
you out too in the middle of
I've
the
heard
night.
that happens to people.
Yeah, I'll vouch for that.
Margaret doesn't know the story. We'll tell you afterwards, Margaret.
All right.
We
So
should
let's
mention to the crowd real quickly. John had an accident where he broke a couple of ribs. That's what we're.
broke a few ribs. Yes.
And yet here he is.
Now, I find it very fascinating. You know, I'm speaking to a panelist group here that has quite almost 200 years of experience. For the vast majority of other people that haven't actually had this kind of experience, what's interesting is that these aren't always the kind of conversations that people have. So I'm slowing us down on some of these because you all have been gifted with this knowledge that I think has inspired you to live your life differently. And if there's one thing that I, Kimberly Faith, really wanted to do here is slow us down, because anyone who is listening now or in the future want them to know that this is available to them, no matter what their programming is, no matter what the dogma that's been handed to them, no matter what they've adopted, like what Margaret was referring to, or even I had referred to. All of those things are not truths. These are the truths and the ecstasy and the eternal oneness that that's beckoning to us all. Fair enough?
Yes. And it doesn't matter what you've done or what you're going through. If you can just grasp the concept of the universality of all things that culminates in that one word, love, just in the worst moments, hang on to that, because
Yeah.
it's hard to believe you're loved sometimes when you're going through some things that seem very unloving. But
Yeah.
Margaret pointed it out beautifully. There's nothing going on this planet that wasn't perpetuated or brought into motion by man's thinking, individually and collectively. So for us to look at that and judge it as evil is to say, it's to literally eliminate the concept of free will with people. What we're seeing happen is free will being expressed. And it can be a very bumpy road, but it takes us ultimately to the goal, which is to know our divinity and then become it.
All right, so let's keep going, because in 851, I want to go to that bracket, the sentence, the blue, where the blue brackets are, and it says, Ken, I'm going to ask you to read this one. If men and women would search for their spiritual mates.
Good girl. Yes. Also, say if men and women would search for their spiritual and mental mates rather than allow their physical senses to govern them, divorce would be impossible. There is nothing in this universe that could separate a man and woman who know and share true love. For such a union is truly a marriage of God, love. True love is eternal. Love and two souls who have found it will find each other again and again in life after life.
All right, panel. So let's talk about this, because that's in effect what Walter and Leo felt, that they were spiritual mates. So this is a big loaded conversation in a world that has over a 50% divorce rate. Who wants to dive into helping unravel this so that we may gift this a new way of thinking to the world here, inspired by the Russells? Go, Margaret.
Well, I remember Leo describing an instance where she was so happy Dr. Russell had been ill and she felt that he turned a corner, and she was so ecstatic that a beautiful melody came to her, and she wished later that she had just written it down, because she felt, that eternal oneness and that ecstasy of knowing that Walter Russell was going to make it, or he wouldn't refold just quite yet. And so a beautiful melody came to her. And she said if only she had taken the time to sit down and write it, because she lost it. But again, it's the interaction with, the easiest way to learn in life is interacting with another soul. And it may not be like a perfect mate at the time, right? But you're still interacting. And every interaction demands balance. So if there's a slight imbalance, even if it's 45-55, there's going to be a residue of tension. So the struggle is always to find that balance and that still center within every interaction. So if you can find the ideal mate, I think the exponential growth is tremendous.
Well, let me ask the group though, because these aren't the kinds of conversations that we have with young people when they're looking for their spirit, when they're mates. I mean, this is quite opposite of the kind of conversations that we have in the world. So we're looking to realign the way people think. So come on, folks, let's keep diving into it. That many of us here on the screen have had good relationships, difficult relationships, no relationships.
Yep.
Who wants to dive into the truth of this subject? Because this is a big, important paragraph.
I will come in on this a little bit here, and just in terms of my own life and my experience and what I've come to realize, as opposed to what I may have known at the time. But what I realized is I always entered relationships through the physical portal. And that's part of programming, training, could have been my childhood. I don't really know. And it started changing the way that I lived in the world, and I became to know God within myself, and those things started changing. Well, I still had that patterning, that programming of looking for love through the physical vessel, thinking that's wasn't what I was doing. I was looking for someone that was mentally, spiritually, and physically my match. The problem is that I've been a physical person for so long that it's very easy to put that first, which is where all mistakes come from, because I may be physically compatible with someone, but if I'm not mentally and spiritually compatible with them, then I'm not going to want to spend any time with them outside of the bedroom, right? And we all know, if we've had that, physicality can only sustain you for so long. It's like almost thinking I'm going to eat a meal and never, as long as I eat enough, I'm never going to have to eat again. It's just not possible. So to reinvent and rechange the programming is look for somebody if you are looking for a relationship. And if the desire is in you, then that means there is a mate for you. It couldn't be any other way. Otherwise, the desire wouldn't be there. And the bottom line is, enter the portal through mentally and spiritually first, and physically will always follow. That's the beauty of it. It doesn't mean you have to nullify the physicality, but if you are mentally and spiritually attuned with someone, the physicality always follows that kind of deep love. Like, I admire Kimberly so much for who she is. I see so much beauty in her mentality, the way she operates in this 3D world. And spiritually, we're on the same page with the presence of God being in our life, living a life.
What about the rest of the panel? Talk a little bit about yours, or talk about the kind of conversations we could be having with young people. John?
Well, I'll leave the young people to work it out on their own. But I'll share a personal story with you. This was early on with my relationship with my Karen, my beloved, and she would shift work. I worked every weekend, and it was hard to even, get together to even have a conversation. And this went on for months. And one day I was working in my yard. It was towards the evening, and it was like God slapped me on the back of my head and said, "Look up." And I looked up, and it was the most glorious sunset you would ever
Mm.
want to envision. And I was just kind of leaning on my shovel, and I said, "Well, thank you, God. I was too busy glorifying you to see you returning the favor." And just that time, my phone rings,
Mm.
and it was Karen. And she says, "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" And at that moment right there, I knew that she was the one for me, because unless you can have God and spirituality in your life and
Mm.
in your relationship, you don't have anything.
Yep.
You don't have anything at all. And so that was a wonderful, because we could have spent months, maybe even years getting to know each other and try to figure out, well, geez, what's this person like, and this and that. But just in that one moment, it just think of all that didn't have to be said. So anyway, I
Wow.
just share that story.
Great story. Great story.
Jim, you want to chime in?
Well, how do I top that? My gosh.
Mm.
Now I still commune with my past wife every day. Uh, Loving thoughts whenever she pops into my mind. We have had a lot of things that we like together. So when I see those things appear in my life, I know in my heart that within that appearance, there's also a message and a reminder from me. We had those sunsets together. We had all the joy that you could want in life, and we also had the knowledge and understanding that one of us would leave the planet before the other one, and that when that happened, that we were to go on living and loving. And so that's what I do. I watched Leo do it. When we got there, and John can verify this, over time you realize that Dr. Russell was physically gone from the palace and the day to day, but in her heart, he was alive and well, and they were communicating constantly. And she pointed out to me, as I've said before, that she missed his physical presence, but their mental state, their love was absolutely as strong as it was, while here. So if people just grasp on that, because my God, loss happens, things come and go, and I tend to fall back on the Lord of the Rings. Don't make something your precious. The way to truly love is to be willing to make nothing your precious except awakening your divine within. And so when things go in and out of your life, love them, present or not present, and that's what keeps me whole and going. My love for life and beauty, and look at the people here. My love for the people on the screen is boundless.
It is.
Well, we all don't want to end up like Spiegel, that's for sure.
That's true.
Margaret.
Yeah, I would add, I don't know if you all have read Leo's book, Love.
Yes, I have.
I always remember, and I was just a young teenager when I read that book, and it made a huge impact on me. But in one passage, she says there's a 23-hour test.
I love that.
Let's say you meet someone new, and this is what young people need to know, right?
Yep.
You meet someone new, and you start getting to know them. If you can't spend 23 hours with them, feeling like you're in a room by yourself, like you're totally yourself for 23 hours, then that last hour would be ecstasy, which means a union. But that's the mental closeness, but just being with someone as though you're by yourself. So you're that comfortable with someone.
Yeah.
And that's rare. You don't find that very often in life. So,
Well, when we think about it, Margaret, the way the industry and the way society has romanticized love to such a degree, it has distorted our understanding of what real love is, and and the times that it's leaving spirituality out of love. So I have been married a few times, twice, and the first time was out of fear because I was too young, and I made a fearful choice. And the second time, I thought it was okay, but not recognizing that spirituality wasn't a part of it. And I thought it would be okay if spirituality was my part only. And that was a huge mistake. I didn't know that. I didn't, I thought my spirituality was strong enough. But so I bring this up to everybody because no matter what age you are, in the video that we talk about where how Ken and I met, the cosmic romance, that was a shocking development for me at my age, at a lovely, ripe, young age of 56, young, I believe. And so you're never too young or never too old. But for all of us, the definition, what I find so powerful about this work is redefining our experience with love and loving the people on this panel, like Jim said, whether it's loving a mate, whether it's loving, I literally fell in love with the museum. I've learned the capacity of love was quite profound and broadened to such a degree that there was a while there that I became nothing but this one big walking heart of love. But John will say to you, he will be one of the first to tell you that the day I walked into that museum, my heart was completely closed off. Was it not, John?
Yes.
I was incredibly brokenhearted. And I believe I have such compassion for the fact that there are a lot of broken hearts in this world. And the minute that we can assist and inspire and awaken and invite so many of these people to realize that that is the illusion, the brokenness is the illusion, and that the love is the truth, that's when I believe that things in the universe will begin to change. A final thought before we take our next break?
I just want to say hi to Susie. Go ahead, John.
I was going to say, we were all brought up, and I guess they're still teaching it today in science, that, opposites attract. And there could be no more wrong thing in the universe. Opposites do not attract.
Agreed.
So the secret to a loving and lasting relationship is you need to find somebody that you have things in common with.
Yep.
And the more that you have in common, then the more beautiful the relationship is. But if you're arguing and fighting, screaming at each other, man, you need to move on because it ain't never going to happen. It's like oil and water; it'll never mix. You can shake the hell out of it, but it still isn't gonna stay together.
Now, that doesn't mean, I want to make sure people understand that, sometimes in life you got certain positions, certain roles, and it's even in the book of love that Leo wrote about that not everybody is going to get into the perfect matrimony or a perfect relationship, but that doesn't mean that we can't still express love everywhere we go. You see, and and the reason we express love everywhere we go is because we learn to love the God within. And then when I learn to love the God within me, I can now see the God within you. And the first way that I learned to see it in me personally was treating others with love. When I started treating people well, I used to not be able to look in the mirror and like what I saw. But as I started living this message and I started seeing God in everywhere I could, inviting God into my thought life every moment I could, seeing God's light, like John's talking about, looking at, don't just walk by that sunset, man, embrace it. Not only embrace it, you can't find the point to where the beauty is in it. So just engulf yourself in it. So in other words, we can't always have that perfect matrimony. So don't think you're lacking if that's not there. That's not what it's about. It's just about the expression of love and life. When it comes to relationships, though, it really is important that mental and spiritual, like Kimberly said, I was married before and I married a woman, and I can't believe she just said that, because I would say the exact same scenario. I was more the spiritual guy and carrying the spiritual torch, and I thought, I'm not going to make it that somebody has to understand all the stuff that I understand. I've taken a deep dive, et cetera, et cetera. And let me tell you something, man, it just, until I met Kimberly, And I met someone that mentally and spiritually has fulfilled me from the moment I've met her, and it grows every day. I love her more and more every day because God tells me to put more love into her every day. So love keeps growing too. It doesn't just stop.
So I want to mention, so the question is, are you Muslim? I don't associate with any. I associate with love. That's what I associate with. Whenever people ask me what it is that I am, I always say I operate under the tree philosophy. Trees, I've never seen a tree have to declare what it is or put a sign up of what it is. It simply is there in all its majesty. And I have prescribed myself to the tree philosophy for many, many decades now because I simply want to be an expression of love in all its glory. But I do want to mention something before we go to break, because for all of us, even during the times when I didn't have a relationship, what the Russell work taught me was to fall in love with life. To fall in love with life, that everywhere you look, the sunset, the moon, the trees, the garden, that this was an expression of the creator giving us an expression of love. And so I just wanted to ask the panel to comment on that, because to me, that's what it was, is I had forgotten to fall in love with life and everything else followed after that. Does that resonate?
I want to comment on a word that Ken used earlier, fulfilled. So when you are fulfilled in a relationship, like Leo wrote in the book, there's nothing that could pull or move that relationship apart.
Yep.
And that's and that's a good marker for people. You know, you can say to yourself, well, am I fulfilled? Why, would I have that eye that kind of looks at something and go, geez, I wonder what that would be like. And so if that is happening to you, then you're not fulfilled. Right?
Or you have a fault finding mind. A lot of people in relationships, and you know who they tear apart the worst? The person closest to them. You take a
Right.
stranger, you treat them like $1,000,000. People at home, you treat them like dog poop. It makes no sense, right? The people you're closest to, you would think you would treat the best. And that's, for me, was my own discovery of like, why would I treat a stranger better than I treat my wife or the people, my neighbors, or the people that are closest in my life? And that's what I found out and discovered myself a little bit more about being conditional and trying to get something rather than give. Just give and know you'll be re-given. That is the secret sauce in life.
All right. So as we're getting ready to go into the break, Margaret, you wanted to comment, and then I wanted to read a quick sentence before I have Sal go out to a 3-minute break.
Yeah, I was just going to add that you do want someone with shared interests, but you also want someone that challenges you. Because if you're too much alike, there's no challenge, and then there's boredom. So in other words, you've got to have a growing relationship, and each should show the other something new. And it should be ongoing, right? Because otherwise, just boredom will take over. So you do have to be challenged by a mate.
Sort of like the pistons in an engine, Margaret, right? The driving
Right.
mechanism, back and
Right.
forth and back and forth. Beautiful.
Right.
Well said. Well said.
There's no boredom with you, honey. I can promise
Yeah,
you
that's
that.
for sure.
So the
I
living.
don't even get bored with me.
As we come back, though, we're going to go into the bottom of page 851, and that last paragraph, it talks about the living of life.
Don't steal my key light. Okay, go ahead.
And it says the purpose of your whole life's experiences is to find and know your creator. To find and know your creator. So for the team, we have 5 more pages to continue with this particular lesson, but I want to encourage everyone that what this is about is finding this heartbeat of love and falling in love with life. And when you fall in love with life and know your creator, the magic is absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. So thank you everyone for all of your comments. We have Susie that says fall in love with life. Excellent. Thank you. Rita is saying such beautiful conversations tonight. Rita, Unit 12 is just full of beautiful conversations. I can't tell you. And Laurel says, of course, that Casey is there. He's known on the West Coast is the least boring person I know. And I would say
Hi,
amen
Laurel.
to that.
Hi, my girl. Good to see you there.
So let's take our quick 3-minute break and continue the conversation with our panel. See you in right. Find your way back. Find your way back. So before we dive into the conversation, I am going to ask Margaret to comment on something. So Margaret, I know that you serve right now on the board of directors for the University of Science and Philosophy, and you were referring to two events that they had. Can you tell the audience right quick about those two events that they can sign up for on the website so they can interact
Oh,
like what you were speaking of?
right. So every month, and it's the third Tuesday of every month, there's a science call. So for people that would like to learn a little bit more of the science so that they also know the philosophy, because you need both to really grasp it. So every third Tuesday of the month, and it starts at 6 p.m. And so that
Okay.
you can register online at philosophy.org. And then every third Thursday, there's a conversation about the philosophy with a focus and a topic. And that's every third Thursday,
So we just
6
wanted to
p.m.
mention that because we know that this particular panel is more where we're talking, but there are some people who crave that kind of conversation. Certainly wanted to let you know those things are available. So if we could, I'm going to ask Ken to end up reading that last paragraph. That's on page 851, right where we were, James. The living of life. It talks about the purpose of your whole life's experience. What's that whole paragraph of?
The living of life. The purpose of your whole life's experience is to find and know your creator, which is Jim was talking about his favorite sentence in here. The laws of creation are inviolate laws, which man can only know through a basic understanding of the creator's ways and processes. The principle which underlies all cosmic law is love. And this perhaps would be better understood if we use the three dynamic words: rhythmic, balanced,
You'll
interchange,
keep going to the top of the next page, please. Scroll down, James.
RBI. The meaning of rhythmic balanced interchange is equal giving for equal re-giving and not equal receiving, because every pair of opposites in nature is balanced equally even unto life and death. What goes into the ground must equal that which comes out of the ground. Balance is the fulcrum of this lever of equal giving and re-giving.
All right. So I want to encourage everyone to please put into the chat box equal giving for equal re-giving. This is an important Russell philosophy, and I'm going to ask John if he'll comment, and then John, and then Jim. Equal giving for re-giving. So how is that different from the way the world sees it right now? John?
Here's what I will say to that. One of the greatest gifts that Leo gave me was the word balance and the definition and the demonstration of what balance is. And so I have taken that one word and incorporated that in my life. So whether I'm decorating or creating something and so on, and if you look at the symmetry in nature, and if you try to duplicate that, because when you have something that is balanced, there is no residue. There is not anything that's out of balance. And so I'll share with you a quick story about Leo and how she was a great salesman. So when you first came into the palace, there were tables there and all the books were there. So my first couple of days there, Leo explained to me how those books to be set up. So I noticed that there was a stack of books that were like crooked. You know, they were stacked and kind of like coming apart. So my first impression was to grab that stack, and she goes, "Don't touch that." And then she explained to me, because those books were out of balance, it's going to draw a person's eye to that particular book and to that stack. And I thought, damn, that's brilliant from a marketing standpoint. You see,
Okay.
so rhythmic balanced interchange is exactly that, right? Because if it's not balanced, and you can love too much, you can love and give way too much to where it's sickening. Okay, because you want, and then the over giving, and if nothing's coming back, then you want to just give more, and then that emptiness comes in, right? Then you become disheartened, and then you become angry, you become hurt, you let emotions take over. So But that one word has carried me all my life, and it has served me well. I would encourage all the people listening is to take that one word, think it through, and try to do their own demonstration of how it improves in their life and in their home and in their work.
Okay. So, Jim, and then I'm going to come back to Margaret. Jim, can you talk specifically about equal giving for re-giving? What does that mean?
Well, it's the goal. We don't always accomplish it. I think John's dancing all over it, and we have been all night. When the concept of giving has got to be followed with balance. It's got to be in your mindset. You don't stop giving because you're not being re-given, but you don't drain yourself to continue to give to those that don't have yet the ability to give back. You separate yourself from that unbalanced situation to the best of your ability, and then you find people that you can equally interact with. So it's a life is a dance, and it's now in my 70s. It's well worth having done the dance. It's well worth having found myself trip and fall on the floor and gotten back up again to get back into it again. All of the ups and downs in the broad view are worth it because they're experiences that it really does culminate in love. It just, at least that's where I am at this stage in my life. I cannot think about anything else but finding love and balance in my relationships with everybody. And I pray every day that people stop being so hard on themselves every day.
Well, and I have a practical example of that, but Margaret, I know you wanted to chime in.
Right. When she says equal giving for equal re-giving, I often recall I have a personal friend, and she has a rather stormy relationship with two of her children. And one day she got short with her son. And so she wasn't exactly kind to him, right? So he storms off. And so later that evening, she calls him. Later that evening, she calls him and she apologizes. And so her act of giving to the son in the apology, she was simultaneously re-given because then she could sleep. So in other words, when you create an imbalance in your own life, it's on you to balance it. So in other words, you're not waiting for someone else to apologize, right?
Okay.
Because your actions are your own. And, if you overgive to someone and there's no re-giving, so what? It's you want to give, you give out. Now, if you give out unwisely, yeah, there might be a ramification that's not agreeable with you. In other words, you can enable someone to rely on you. You can enable someone to, always expect something from you. So you have to rebalance that yourself. So, in other words, the giving is simultaneously re-given in the very action of giving. Because my friend had to make that apology. She knew she was incorrect or unbalanced. So she made the apology so she was able to sleep that night.
Yes. Well, and one thing that I found when I was learning this, when I was first at the museum, okay, when I was working with John and we were doing the Russell experiences, is that, we're used to hearing of give and take, give and take, give and take. But to me, that stops the process. What I really appreciated about the giving and re-giving is that it's a continuous process. And when we think about this as it relates to the wave, this continuous process goes on. And John, I found that to be incredibly helpful when you finally helped teach me the difference between giving and taking and giving and re-giving.
I wanted to reference Margaret's story there, where the lady was struggling with the boy or the son that was out of balance. And it caused me to reflect on my childhood and how I was given balance, because my dad would reach down and he'd unhook that belt and pull that belt out, and he was able to balance that situation real quick. And then I could sleep better at night, and I know he could.
And yeah, you must be the residue effect.
I must be. Yeah.
So,
So anyway,
Can I come in?
yeah, go ahead.
All right. You done, John?
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. So here in the prior paragraph we read that says in there, the laws of creation are inviolate laws. This is the reason for me about giving. And then it goes on to say giving for equal re-giving and not equal receiving. So we don't give with agendas. God always re-gives. I don't look for you to re-give. I have helped thousands of souls, and I never seek to be re-given by any soul. God always re-gives to my life for everything I give. It's inviolate law. It's law. So just keep giving, knowing you'll be re-given. But if you take, then also will happen by law is you will be taken from. Whatever you take shall be taken from you. Whatever you give shall be re-given to you. That's the inviolate law. So it's not about man. It's about me. It's about me and how I can live in balance and realize I can give without seeking something in return, because I know the return is the way I feel inside, and the return is how the world treats me. When I treat well, then the world.
That's a great look on Ken there, isn't it?
You can see the passion.
Coming back.
So
Coming back.
So our
Are you
internet.
guys back?
Yeah, we're back.
He,
God
he-
said that's enough.
God said that was all, Ken. So let's pull up what Karen
Hang
had
on.
to say. Let's
Hang on
Go ahead,
one
John.
second.
yeah.
I want to share a story similar to this. I'll make it real quick. I was in the 7-Eleven the other day getting a cup of coffee, and this young man was behind me, and he had gotten a Red Bull, and he was standing behind me. And I said to the lady, I said, I want to buy this young man's drink this morning. And he goes, sir, he said, that's almost $4. He said, I don't think you should do that. I said, no, I said, it's fine. And isn't that interesting that I could tell by his comment that no one it's been a long time, I think, since that young man had ever received an act of kindness. And he was almost at a point where he couldn't accept that gesture of love and kindness. But it made me feel good walking away that I was able to reach out to that soul. So those are the little things, right? And Leo would always say that. Margaret, you know that. Leo always said the little things that matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so may we encourage everyone that's listening tonight and anytime in the future to see what can you do to give more to the world. Sometimes life can feel pretty bitter and you can get lost thinking that you've been kicked and kicked and kicked. And then what happens is we end up in a dark hole and we can't see the light. So what we're suggesting here and what's being said is that just light is all that exists. So get out there and start sharing more, loving more, giving more, even if it's simply picking up the phone and checking on people. I do want to mention Karen's comment here. It says, love that, Margaret. On page 183, it says the incidents in our lives are of secondary importance, but our adjustments to those incidents and to what we gain from them is primary. So thank you so much, Karen. All right, everyone. I know we're down to the last bit of time, so I want to go ahead and jump ahead to page 853. John, I'm going to ask you, if you would, to please read that first paragraph that's highlighted in yellow, how to know God.
Isn't that a powerful statement there? Wow, how to know God. There is only one way to know God, and that one way is through knowing and living his law of love. That one way is found through inner vision, which inspiration awakens into physical expression.
Gorgeous. Just gorgeous. And Jim, I'm going to ask you, if you would, we're going to scroll down to where I have the green highlight. It says, man knows God when has got awareness. Would you share that paragraph, please, James, if you'll scroll down?
Man knows God when his awareness of God's light is awakened in him. This awakening comes into being by diverse experiences, and that is why we say every experience is good. The experiences which bring man a great sense of aloneness must most often are the ones which awaken the light of God in him. For where there is sorrow, there is solitude, and then a point of rest is reached. Man's fulcrum, which is his balance, lies within himself. To discover and know this fulcrum is his moment-to-moment task. That is why we so often stress the fact that the incidents in our lives are of secondary importance, but our adjustment to those incidents and what we gain from them is of primary importance. You just can't say it any clearer than that. And
Yeah.
yeah.
That is
And
why that's why God invented Murphy. You guys know who Murphy is?
it does make you wonder about that time.
I
And
know.
so Margaret, I'm going to ask you if you would, for that bottom of page 853 in blue, it says we have gained strength in our character. If you'll just read what's highlighted in blue there, because I thought that was so important in light of everything that's happening in today's world.
We have gained strength in our character, and our individual destiny is created by our individual character. That is why philosophers of all time have counseled us to seek within and know ourselves.
So talk for a moment about character. This is part of why we do this. Character is important to everyone that's on this panel. And I would just like to ask panelists to comment. We're in an age right now where character is more important than ever. And what needs to be said about that? Because that's not a subject that's being talked about enough.
Well, there was a time when character was taught, and it started at an early age. And then once that was drilled into you after a certain amount of time, then it carried over into your life, into your adulthood. And character is who defines us. Your character, what you do and who you are and your actions. But it's not taught anymore. I don't even think it's discussed anymore. From a mass thing, I don't think it's taught in schools. Hell, they don't even teach kids how to walk down the right side of a hallway anymore. It's just everybody just goes wherever they want. It's chaos.
Margaret?
I would say, character is an invisible something that you pick up on a person. Like as soon as you meet them, you kind of know. And then through conversation, it reveals itself. So, as a realtor, I've kind of learned this. So if I'm trying to vet, a potential tenant for a client, I engage in a conversation, and very soon you kind of know their character. So it is an invisible something that you know, and you can even have a hunch as to whether or not they'll be a suitable tenant for a particular landlord. And I've noticed too that people will tend to refer, like I get a lot of referrals, and I think it's because people do realize that I'm looking out for them. I'm not looking at my paycheck, right? I'm looking out for them. They know that intuitively, so they trust me, and so they'll refer me out to their friends. So it's a kind of an invisible something that that you pick up on.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't take tips, Margaret?
Right, no tips.
I want to just read that one time, and I'm going to read it in first person to give people a little idea of why this is so important to me to read in first person. When I at last long realize what the purpose of my life is, I endeavor to use each moment constructively. For I know that when I overcome a weakness in myself, I have gained strength in character, and that my individual destiny is created by my own individual character. That is why philosophers of all time have counseled us to seek within and know ourselves. So now it's about me, not you, us, civilization, character. Everybody's a character in life. I learned that a long time ago when I started this whole mission of building a new character, and realized what kind of character was I? Because how could I build a new one if I didn't know how the old one operated and what was broken in it? And that's a lot of stuff that I think needs to be talked about a little bit more, is to break down a little bit of the senses, the thought life, why it's so important. Because my thought, you're not the sum total of your thoughts, just as it was referred to earlier on page 183. You're the sum total of action. But remember this, and this is something I've learned, and I learned it through this message: thought, feeling, action. Those are the sequences in which I unfold. So my thought life is important, but if I have a concept, an idea, and I never take an action, that idea will never come to fruition. So action is just as important as thought. But for me, the character that I was is I had a fault-finding mind. I had learned to see what was wrong with people. I would find their weaknesses instead of their strengths. I would try, and the reason was because I felt weak, because I felt insecure. So I had to seek your insecurities, your weaknesses, to somehow empower me. That's the character that I brought to this place where it needed a transformation. And now I realize true character is character that's consistent, that's kindness, that shows love, that shows humility, right? That doesn't live in any of that sense living, that can rise into its higher self. That to me is a good character. And like Margaret says, you can read it in everybody. Everybody has a countenance within. That's the spirit within. So as Shakespeare said, your actions speak so loud, I cannot hear a word you're saying. So we all project the character that we are without a word being said. And so, Margaret, that's great intuition on your part, expressing that with sales.
Now, I recognize with honor we're getting close to the end of the time, but there are a few other things I want to be sure we cover as we wrap up. But before we do, Rita has a question for us, and it is this. She says, in that third paragraph on page 853, which, Rita, love the fact that you have your copy of the home study course. It is that's what we encourage. Girl. That's what we encourage everyone, is to get a copy of that home study course. The link there will be placed in the chat box. Could you speak more about this? Man's fulcrum, which is his balance, lies within himself. To discover and know his fulcrum is his moment-to-moment task. All right. Who wants to? John, and then I'll come to Ken. Then I'll open it up.
So fulcrum is just another word for God, for stillness. Mm-hmm. So when you discover God, when you discover your inner self, and then your next mission is to try to live that discovery moment to moment. It's pretty simple. Good question, though, Rita.
Yeah, Rita. You know, the way we do it is we do a seesaw. So we show it on a seesaw. So the seesaw goes like this. The fulcrum is this lever, which never moves. But the seesaw could not have any motion without the fulcrum. So when we find our fulcrum, as John's saying, it's that stillness, that undivided part of ourselves. When you feel like there are other people in the world, you're wrong. We're all one. And the great way you can recognize that is think about, where is the center of your universe? It's center of everybody's universe is within themselves. We all center our own universe. That's really what makes us all one, that we are all the center of the universe, and we're all united in that centering of that universe. And that is the fulcrum. That fulcrum is undivided, where I'm no longer left or right. I'm no longer bigger or smaller. I'm just the same as everyone else, and everybody has the same potential, the same brilliance, the same capacity as anybody else. Nobody's better than anybody else. And that to me is a true fulcrum, is to realize, to live in this world as one, and finding that oneness in others is to, for me, is to find the fulcrum, not just only in myself, but to connect that fulcrum in me, inside you too. And now we become one.
Jim, do you have the seesaw handy? I'm not at the studio tonight. I don't have mine handy.
I do not have mine here.
I got one. Look, right here.
Well, I know. Hey, John,
John,
thank you. If you'll pull John's up. So
that's not a fulcrum,
that wasn't the seesaw. A lot of good. I'm not at my studio with my toys. Okay. So as we're thank you very much, Rita, for asking this. And please understand, for everyone who's listening, this entire broadcast all year was not about teaching the home study course. It was about inspiring you to tap in and to awaken the knowledge inside of you. And that was what our goal was to inspire people to want to learn more. Go ahead. What?
The goal is to share what we've learned, right? It's changed our lives. So if it can change our lives, then it can change your life. So it's like when you find something so good, so beautiful, so pure, that's
So
what
pure.
love does. You want to give it to others so that you can have it too. I wanted to make some positive changes in my life, and this home study course and these writings, it's not just the home study course, guys. There are many books. You've heard of a couple of them. There's a whole library of them. So to me, there's so much knowledge, so much philosophy, and so much to learn. And as I learn it, I realize, wow, this has helped me to not get stuck in problems anymore. Wow, this has helped me to always look for the solution and not become a problem person. This has helped me to, when we just read that inner imagination, inner sensory, it's talking about your imagination. Your most powerful tool you have in life is imagination. And that is when we're one with God, when we start to use our imagination to create things.
All right, so I'm going to go to John and then Margaret, and then I'm going to wrap up with a few things for our panel to comment on. John.
You know, Leo had a wonderful expression, and she would always say the practicality of spirituality. And so what I would like to say to Kim and Ken and to our listening world, how beautiful it is to see the two of you sitting there together instead of being apart on the broadcast. And it demonstrates that male-female principle and the blue and the red. And so even though you may not have thought of it in that way, but that is just a demonstration right there is a demonstration of the love principle, the male, the female, the red, the blue. And it's just wonderful to see the two of you together like that, broadcasting the home study course.
Now that was a gift. Thank you, brother. That felt good.
Makes my heart happy. Margaret?
Yeah, so when she asked about the inner fulcrum, I always think back on different periods, like even with my friends, like if you ever have an argument with a friend, right? And if you feel like you're the cause of the argument, that fulcrum it's out of balance. In other words, your lever is way up here, and you need to do something to bring you back to peace. So you could say healing, you could say quietude, you could say peace. You have to bring yourself back to that fulcrum in order to have healing. So you have to take action in order to regain that fulcrum. And it happened. You have to do it like every day. It's a continual struggle.
Maybe,
and so sometimes
maybe
I was going to say, if the interaction is something that doesn't belong to you, in other words, if someone treats you cruelly, you have to step away entirely and say, this is not of me.
Yep.
So you can regain your own fulcrum.
Yep.
Right.
Because you didn't deserve that. So.
Yeah, it sounded like a lot of work. I'd just find a new friend, Margaret. Look at our frozen couple there.
So here's just a few thoughts as we're wrapping up. A storm must be settling in. So over on page 854, it talks about how where Jesus said, seek ye first the kingdom of God within, and all else shall be added unto you. Socrates said, know thyself. The people who give most to life are usually the ones who have known the greatest personal suffering, either mental or physical. The deeper the suffering, the deeper the inner searching for the answer. From that deep inner source of all knowledge comes the clear answer. Incredibly powerful. And James, if you'll scroll down here, I'd like to go where the star is. And the star said this. It says, no man knew greater sorrow on earth than Jesus did. And the more he suffered, the more he loved and gave. And I would say that that was with other illuminates and geniuses as well. But I want to go ahead over here to page 855 and go where the green circle is, because this is really, really important. And I know that we're getting here close to the end. And it says this, and I'll ask Margaret, would you mind reading that paragraph? In love, there is freedom.
Okay. In love, there is freedom, every kind of freedom, for there can be no hate, fear, greed, jealousy, covetousness, or hypocrisy where there is an all-enveloping love. When a man has the opportunity to know himself, He knows the exquisite ecstasy of his true self, the self which all men are destined to find and know, whether it be in this life or in a million lives from this one brief expression, which at best is but a breath in the timelessness of eternity.
And Ken, if you'll go to the following sentence, that's it. What is meant by?
What is meant by the truth shall make you free is that when you really know truth, you will live truth, and truth is love, honesty, and beauty. And you will desire only to give, for you will know that you can fulfill your purpose on earth only by giving, so that you may be in turn be regiven and other be regiven. Excuse me.
All right, dear ones, this was quite a powerful session here this
Yeah,
evening.
great job.
A big subject. And so next week we will continue with lesson 46 is what we'll go into. So I want to bring up Bonnie's comment. She says, I appreciate all of you and your work in presenting these postings. Bonnie, it's all done with much love. Much love. And Karen says, so beautiful. And yes, the colors are. She was giving us a nice, lovely comment.
Thanks, Karen.
So please, everyone, place in the chat box. I'm going to spread love this week. Let's just say I'm going to spread love. I will be love, whatever it is that you feel inspired right now to put in there. I'm going to ask the panel for any last comment as we wrap up, as everyone's placing something about love. Jim, what do you want to say as we wrap up here this evening?
I have thoroughly enjoyed this tonight. Thank you, guys. It's been wonderful to hear what you've had to say. Just wonderful.
And I would add that, just the very act that you have put this together, Kim and Ken and John and Jim, the very act of you giving out from yourselves, you're simultaneously re-given through your deepening understanding of the work.
Mhm.
So, and I love the way, Leo is really clarifying here what Jesus tried to teach, and it wasn't understood in his day. It still is not understood in this day. So she's trying to clarify what he tried to teach. But she says, the more you give, the more is added on to you, because you have a simultaneous deepening of your understanding of love. And then every time you add to your character, it's going to insulate you from the ugliness in the world. In other words, you'll be aware of it, right? But you won't let it touch you, because it's a cosmic drama that someone else is living, and of course it influences everyone, but you're able to insulate yourself from the ugliness.
Well said. And John, you said a comment there in the private chat. Please share it with everybody, because I think it's very applicable as we wrap up. Without love, there is nothing.
Amen.
Perfectly
Well
said. And Bonnie says she's going to spread love as I do peanut butter thickly. So can't say it any better than that to everybody. Much love to you here this evening. We will see you next Sunday for lesson 46. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.